Guardians are one of the most terrifying enemies in Zelda history in my opinion. They're giant mechanical behemoths possessed by a spirit of pure evil and with more firepower than a whole army. The irony of their naming, Guardians, goes hand in hand with how terrifying their backstory is. They were one of Hyrule's last hopes, valiant constructs built by the genius Sheikah to defend against the Calamity Ganon, mobile weapons with godlike power that were then turned against the side they were supposed to protect. But by the time of Breath of the Wild, 100 years after the Great Calamity completely destroyed Hyrule, these things are littered everywhere, either lying dormant until Link walks past, or scuttling around freely until they spot you, where they go full on death mode, turn on their angry red lights and run at you. Still f***ing terrifying. But what a lot of people don't know is that the Guardians were actually based on the Octoroks from the first Zelda game. Yeah, these guys were based on these guys. Apparently, when designing the first game, the Octoroks seemed gigantic to the developers, which meant that when developing Breath of the Wild, where they wanted to recapture the feeling of the first, they wanted to include huge octopus-like enemies. But apparently large octopus would be gross, so they went with these giant robots. And that's how the Guardians made it into the game, which completely dictated the technology theme of Breath of the Wild. But when looking through the Breath of the Wild Masterworks book, which is chock full of concept art, illustrations and more from the game, I found a page full of concept artwork for Guardians. Looks pretty similar to the final design, yeah? Well then what about this? That's a f***ing nightmare right there. Or what about this? Or this? They get even scarier when you compare them to the little Link drawing next to them for scale. These guys are absolutely gigantic. Imagine if the Zelda team had gone with, say, this gigantic skull thing from the depths of hell instead of the robotic Guardian. These things would be everywhere all over Hyrule just like the Guardians are. And not just that, just like how the Guardians' technology dictated one of the main themes of the game, the Sheikah Magitech, this creepy demon thing would have. I've no idea what that would have meant for the game, but I sure as hell wouldn't want to see this version of Breath of the Wild's Calamity Ganon. Spider Ganon's terrifying enough for me. The scariest thing about a Guardian in Breath of the Wild is how when it notices you, it freaks out and runs at you, laser charging. Imagine if this guy sees you from across Hyrule Field, all of its many eyes suddenly locking on you before sprinting towards you. A spider the size of a house, a skull demon, a giant crab monster, and whatever this thing is. Point is, the Guardians and the impact they had on the theme of the game could have been far darker than just the robots we've got. We could have had a truly dark Zelda with Breath of the Wild. And a lot of people, myself included, are hoping for a Majora's Mask style sequel to Breath of the Wild, using the same engine but in a different world with a different story. Imagine if they do go down a darker route, and we'll have to survive in a giant world riddled with these Lovecraftian nightmare creatures, hunting for dark and eerie dungeons in order to beat a new, equally terrifying villain. We can only dream. One thing I haven't seen many people mention is that this spider-like vision for a Guardian might have been inspired by Princess Mononoke, the Studio Ghibli film. Towards the beginning of the film, the main character Ashitaka is chased by a boar-turned-demon, who at the start of the chase is covered in tendrils. I think it's quite likely this spider design was based on this, because it's almost definite that the first Breath of the Wild trailer we ever got, back in E3 2014, was based on this scene from the famous anime film. There are many videos pointing out the similarities, I'll link a couple in the description. If so, perhaps the connections to Princess Mononoke would have been even stronger in the game than they are. Even though these guys didn't make it in the game as the Guardians, I think it would have still been really cool to put these as some shock enemies somewhere in the overworld. I think Breath of the Wild needed more enemy variety, and imagine going into some sort of dark wood and meeting this. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, leave a like, and if you haven't already, consider subscribing for more Zelda. Cheers guys, and I'll see you next time.